close. He's probably like 50 yards bedded right down here, so I'm gonna butt scoot down, see if I can get a little closer. Gosh, this hair is insane. I can't get over their hair. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 12, 13? Spectacular! Spectacular! Look at this! That was the coolest thing I've ever seen! Huge, man. Thanks a lot. That was awesome. That was it. Woo!
Look like a mountain man.
This is how you pack out a tahr. That was some footage from a recent archery hunt in New Zealand that my wife and I went on. And we were down there for over 3 weeks. And in 3 weeks, or really any amount of time that you spend out hunting, you always learn a lot of things. And that's what this video is gonna be all about. We're gonna cover 8 takeaways or lessons that I learned from our trip to New Zealand. So let's dive into it. The first takeaway is the value of your iPhone for filming when you are on ProRes Log. This next montage was all shot with my iPhone 16 Pro in ProRes Log. There was no ND filter, nothing controlling the shutter speed, just ProRes Log. It's pretty crazy. iPhone, not half bad. I have a upcoming video specifically on how to shoot with your iPhone. I shot the whole video with my iPhone, so I will dive into all the specs and some exciting stuff in that. But the main takeaway is this little camera right here, this little one that you keep in your pocket that everybody has with them every day, all day. It is one powerful tool. All right, second takeaway, this is all on gear. First up, one piece of gear that we took to New Zealand that I probably would never take again. That is a stove for our teepee. Now, I love my stove. I'm using the tahr stove from Peaks. Super fast to set up, very lightweight, extremely efficient. But the thing with the stove is stoves only work when there's good firewood. Yeah, before we went to New Zealand, we talked to some folks and they're like, oh, you gotta bring a stove. It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be cold there. It's gonna be so nice to ward off the chill. The nights are gonna be long, like absolutely bring a stove. All the nights that we spent in the teepee while we were in New Zealand, like there was zero firewood anywhere. And if we did find any amount of timber, it was so waterlogged that you wouldn't have a chance in heck of starting a fire with that. So we brought the stove, but we never actually set the thing up. But as a result, we had an extremely spacious teepee for Karen and I. I really appreciated how much room we had. Future trips to New Zealand, I wouldn't bring a stove. Save a little bit of weight and the space in your luggage and leave the stove at home. All right, next is one piece of gear that we brought that I would definitely bring again, and I didn't include this one in the gear, full gear dump video that we did a while ago. That was the Wiggy Waiters. It was a last minute decision. Karen was like, hey, like, do you think we're gonna be crossing any rivers? I was like, ooh, maybe. I was like, oh, we should bring Wiggy Waiters. They're only 15 ounces. They're this big. It's just like smaller than the size of an Nalgene. And the beauty of these is you just slip them on over whatever boots or shoes you're wearing, and then you run across the river. And if you've only got one set, you literally just put them back in their stuff sack, maybe put a rock in there, and then you're just gonna like football chuck them across back to your partner, and then they'll cross the river. In New Zealand especially, or anywhere where there's potentially a lot of creek or river crossings, you know, normally you would just strip down to your skivvies, maybe wear your Crocs and cross. And if you only have to do that once, like not a big deal. But in New Zealand, there's just so much water, there's so many rivers. Like in one area, we crossed the river like 4 times in a quarter mile. And if we didn't have these, it probably would have taken us like 2 hours. It just was like a massive time suck. So, Wiggy Waiters, 15 ounces, definitely bring these to New Zealand. The one thing with Wiggy Waiters though, is if you bring one pair and you plan to just football chuck these across the river to your partner, make sure that you've got a really good arm. Because on our very first creek crossing, I went and chucked these back to Karen. Like, you know, the river's probably 25 yards across, and I didn't give it like my all, but I gave probably an 80% throw. And I was about 2 yards too short, and the thing splashed in the river, and Karen had to scramble and get a little wet to retrieve the Wiggy Waiters. Be aware. And the third takeaway is to worry about what you can control and let the rest be what it'll be. Now, specifically, I mean the weather. Weather is one thing you don't have any control over. The day we got there, beautiful. Day 2, it was like full-on flood stage. And then day 3, we woke up to nearly 3 feet of snow outside of our accommodations. And our rental car was absolutely stuck. Fortunately, we were staying with our friends Jim and Moana at Clint Hill Station. They have a little guest quarters you can basically rent out. And we had a hard roof over us, but our rental car literally got stuck for 2.5 days, and it was quite a mission to get that thing out.
Go, go, go. Get in the track, get in the track.
But in the 3.5 weeks that we were there, we lost basically half of those days due to weather. And not just like, you know, little clouds, little rain here, like substantial rain and substantial snowstorms, to where even if we were out hunting, even if we were up on the mountain in a tent, we would just be tent bound, just surviving. So I know the Go Hunt guys went over there for, I think they had a 10-day trip. They did 8 days hunting, and they lost basically 6.5 days to weather. So they literally hunted a day and a half. Yeah, so it's just crazy. You can't control the weather, and if it turns super gnar, you just kind of got to go with the flow. Fortunately for us, because we were there for just about 3 weeks, we were able to hunt the weather windows. Every international hunt I go on, or really even any local hunt that I go on, if I'm going in for 10 days, I always plan on losing at least a third of those to weather. That just seems to be the average, but after our trip to New Zealand, that average is definitely going up a little bit. And the fourth takeaway is the value of 2 trekking poles versus 1. So in the past, I've always just brought 1 trekking pole. When I'm running camera gear, you know, I've got one hand on the trekking pole, and then I've got my other hand usually on my camera. And I usually have 2 cameras, so I want to keep one hand just entirely free. But on this trip, Karen was mostly running the camera, and I was primarily hunting. And so often I was running 2 trekking poles, kind of just to try it out, because I haven't really done it. I swear I ate it like 95% less than I normally would. So I stayed upright so much more. It was so nice. You kind of feel like you're in like 4-low, you know, like 4-wheel drive, but low range. Just never tripping, always have a good balance. Like I ended the day, I never really felt fatigued. And we've been home a few weeks now. A few times we've been out either bear hunting or shed hunting. I've brought in 2 trekking poles. And especially when you're climbing through deadfall, to be able to like, you know, not just like have to hurl yourself over logs and stuff, and to be like super calculated over where you're putting your trekking pole and kind of how you're balancing, it's just super nice. So if you've never tried 2 trekking poles, you might try it out. And the 5th takeaway is to always reinforce the stakes on your tent or teepee with rocks. So our second day of hunting, we wake up from the teepee to just some absolutely stunning views of the Southern Alps, and we get our stuff ready to go on a big hike. Mid-morning, the wind starts gusting pretty good. And by afternoon, I don't even know, it was blowing 40 or 50 miles an hour. Like there was times we couldn't even stand up. And actually we made a pretty good play on some tahr. I got within bow range, but the wind was blowing so hard, like I didn't have a chance in heck of making any sort of an accurate shot. Like those things would have had to have been like 15 yards for me to make an ethical shot.
That's the kind of wind you don't mess around with. We're bailing off the mountain now. Fingers crossed our tent is still standing. Crazy.
And so in the evening, we start looping back. We get back towards the tent with an hour left of daylight. We don't see our tent anymore. We're like, oh, it should be right there in the tussock. Like, where is it?
I think our tent is gone. Hopefully it's just there on the ground, but it's definitely not standing up because we can't see it.
We bombed down and run across, and fortunately, a couple of the stakes had pulled out of the ground.
All right, it's still there. It's just not standing up. Thank goodness.
A good reminder to always put rocks on your stakes, because if your shelter blows away, that's not good. I don't want to get to that point. All right, number 6, the camera lens we primarily shot both photos and video with was this beast right here. This is the Tamron 35 to 150. This thing, like I said, it's a beast. And when you zoom it out, like this thing's a chunker. It's like basically the size of my 70-200. It keeps a really low aperture. It's an f2 to 2.8. I rave a lot about the 24 to 240 because it's got such a great focal range. You know, 24 to 240, like you can pretty much get everything in that. Problem is the aperture ends up being really, really high, and like the image quality just kind of sucks. So if image quality is of utmost importance and you want to also get really good photos, this Tamron 35 to 150 is pretty rad. It was also really nice not to be just constantly swapping lenses to get a different look. So I think on future archery hunts especially, this lens is definitely going to make the kit. On the front here, I did put a Nisi True Color ND filter. With film, you want to keep your shutter speed at double your frame rate. The best way to do that is with an ND filter. Otherwise, everything's going to be shot at like f/22, and it's just going to look crappy and garbo, and you're really not going to be utilizing the low aperture that you can get from this guy. All right, and the 7th takeaway is anytime you're traveling, especially traveling internationally, you got to try the local cuisine. New Zealand has a lot of amazing things, but I would say my favorite thing about New Zealand is they have meat pies.
I've been waiting for this moment for so long. I'm gonna try my first New Zealand meat pie. Steak and mushroom. That's so good.
Now, in America, we mostly have pies that have fruit in them, so you know you call them fruit pies. But in New Zealand, they really don't have that. Most of their pies just have meat fillings, and they have like mince and cheese, steak and cheese, bacon and salmon. That's my favorite. But these meat pies, they're in bakeries. There's bakeries on like every single corner. They're like hand pies. They're like this big. I've been doing carnivore for about 6 months, and the only time that I've broken my carnivore streak is when we went to New Zealand, and I had meat pies because the crust, it's carbs and dough and stuff. So worth it. I just had a little bit of stomach upset and kind of felt a little funny. If you go to New Zealand, there are 2 phenomenal bakeries that produce the best meat pies. They are the Sheffield Bakery and then the Fairley Bakery. Arguably, bacon and salmon, at least for me, that's my favorite. And for the 8th and final takeaway, we're gonna switch over to a clip that we shot in New Zealand.
Your arrows and kind of all your archery stuff is your most precious items when you're on an international hunt, because if you only say bring 6 arrows and you shoot 5 of them into the dirt, you might have just broke 5 arrows and you only got 1 left. It's really good to bring extra arrows. I keep all of my spares in this guy right here. It's called the Arrow Vault. You could probably run over this thing with a truck. Like, it is a stout piece. In years past, I would always just bring like a big plastic tube. And it certainly worked, but it wasn't ideal and wasn't as stout and as lightweight as this thing. And when we traveled over here, I had my quiver inside my bow case. I also had this guy full of arrows. But in my quiver, I had just my hunting arrows ready to go. And so I strapped it onto my bow, hiked in here, and I looked at my arrows, and one of my nocks on my number 1 arrow was completely bent. It was like cockeyed like that. It's just like, holy cow. So in the air travel coming over here, there must have been some crazy forces that pushed down and somehow bent my nock. So a little scary. Yeah, check your nocks. Also, protect your extra arrows.
All right, now I'm gonna wrap up this video with a few more clips from our trip. And as always, if you like this video, hit the like button, and if you wanna see more, consider subscribing. Lots more to come.
We're going on an adventure.
You look like a butterfly. A very energetic butterfly. Oh,
The sun's up.
oh, gentleman hours.
All right, here we go.
We are going bow hunting. Bow hunting is about minimizing movement, efficiency.
This is for OnlyFans ASMR of eating a Fairley Bakehouse mince meat pie. It's cold, but still pretty good. We see a tahr. Oh boy, and a dog.
He's so fluffy.
It looks big and old. If you want to be pestered, I will pester you. If you want to be a real serious hunting dog, be serious. We are rifle range from a big bull tahr, and you are playing silly buggers.
A few hours into day 1 of a 5-day backpack hunt with our friend Jim and his pup Cass, we spotted what looked like an old bull tahr. And so, with bow hunting, you try to cut the distance and see what develops. Jim and Cass stayed back while Karen and I tried to see just how close we could get. The wind was absolutely ripping and it was in our favor. I told myself, it's day 1, there's so much cool country to explore ahead of us, and that I was not going to shoot him, no matter what. But I carried my bow anyways, which is always a slippery slope. The wind allowed me to stalk into about 2 yards of him. Now, with bow hunting, getting close is the name of the game, but with just a few steps separating us, this felt different. For a brief moment, my senses relaxed. I stopped being a predator and I just took it all in. I wasn't thinking about my shot process or chasing an outcome. I was just there. I didn't know it at the time, but it's rare moments like that that remind me why I love to bow hunt.